Look, I think two quick points, Pete. I think when it comes to borders, I think in the same way that we'll see the last restriction to ease at the federal level will be the openness of the international borders. Same thing for states. It'll be those borders will be the last thing to open. So in some ways it makes sense, you know, that given that states are pursuing these restrictions easing at their own pace, that the border reopening happens at the last point in time. I think the other thing too, for business as well, I think one thing worse than the borders remaining closed for business would be to have them open and then have a major outbreak and then have to close them again. So I think we do need to sort of, you know, hasten slowly on this sort of stuff, listen to the health advice, and of course the premiers and chief ministers are also guided by their own chief medical officers as well on these matters.
Do you think that there will be a go back on that, you know, if there is a second wave, that restrictions will be placed again, or is it just going to be too damaging financially for the country?
Look, it would be. I think the National Cabinet and all the leaders would be extremely reluctant to go backwards. But, I mean, importantly, the strategy to date has been about buying the health system time to make sure we've got that capacity, that the acute care is ready to go if it's required. Importantly, we've got that more rapid testing and tracing now. So if there is going to be secondary outbreaks, hopefully they can be isolated without a need for those widespread restrictions and lockdowns. So, I mean, Pete, it would be a complete disaster for the economy and business if we had to go back into that.
Well, there is so many challenges already. Housing is another. We've had the Housing Industry Association was on our show yesterday saying that there could be in excess of 500,000 job losses just in the housing sector by the end of this year. If that isn't fixed, I mean, this certainly outlines some of the economic challenges ahead, right?
Yeah, it does. And as we know, we've got JobKeeper coming off, which we've discussed many times on this show, Pete, in September. So there's a bit of an investment cliff coming there for government and the economy. I think the housing market challenge really underscores the fact that we're looking at this economic challenge is going to be not about the next 3 or 4 months, but it's going to be about the next 12 to 18 months. Housing prices obviously will slump a little bit. We know that net overseas migration and that migration impact on housing is not going to be there for a year or 18 months, and the property sector is obviously quite alarmed about it. And importantly for the economy, we know that it's labour intensive when it comes to construction. We also know that we need that pipeline of 180,000 new houses and dwellings every year to be able to house the population as well. So I think it's going to be an area of real focus for the federal government over the next few months, and I'd expect to see some more measures rolled out by them.
James, climate change politics is back. Angus Taylor giving a speech later on today outlining his long-awaited technology roadmap. But from what you've been able to tell so far, who are the winners and losers?
Yeah, look, I think it's. I mean, this is a practical approach for the government. So it's a tick. You know, they're not about that economy-wide a cap on emissions. They're about the practical investment, basically taxpayer investment and partnering with industry. So I think it's a step forward from that perspective. I think for the coalition backbench, it's going to be interesting to see because this, from what I've seen with this discussion paper, is not focusing so much on coal-fired power generation, which has obviously been a concern for them. So we'll see what that means. But I think for gas and for renewables and battery storage, bringing more certainty into the market when it comes to renewables, I think there's some winners there as well. So got to be careful about picking winners, obviously, but setting the proper investment direction from a government perspective is pretty important. So it's a step forward. Is it the end of climate change politics? I suspect not.
Yeah, no, I think it's got a way to go. I mean, a couple of interesting points on that. There's a bit of talk about carbon capture and storage when it comes to coal as well, so it hasn't, you know, completely missed out. And there's also, you know, a point at 2023 when the government hopes there will be an uptake of electric cars, which you would have thought would get some support from Labor, considering that was one of the key planks of the last election.
Yeah, well, that just goes back to those climate change politics, doesn't it, Pete? You know, last year Bill Shorten was going to end the weekend when it came to, you know, having electric vehicles taking the place of Holden Utes. So, yeah, look, I mean, at the end of the day, it's practical, and the decarbonisation that's happening across the Western world is an unstoppable force, and we need to be with it. And in fact, we've got many companies here which are leading the way when it comes to renewable technologies, including supporting and providing parts for electric vehicles. So we need to be supporting in a careful way those sorts of technologies because that's the path ahead, and it's also good for Australian jobs.
Yep.